Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 19th episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. Today, we are going to be ranking all 11 live action Star Wars movies. So, this list will include the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the sequel trilogy, as well as the two standalone stories. Before I get into this, I would like to say that I am a Star Wars fan. I've seen all the movies multiple times, even some of the ones that people really hate. Star Wars, for me personally, was my gateway to film, which I'll talk very briefly on when I get to a certain film on the list. I'm fully aware of Star Wars fans and how some of them can be in regards to these movies, and I understand the passion behind it. This franchise means a lot to its fans, and I am included in that. With that said, I understand this list may be controversial to some, but that's why we are here to have healthy debates and discussions over the things we love. So let's get into Star Wars Ranked. Number 11, Rise of Skywalker, 2019, directed by J.J. Abrams. Rise of Skywalker took everything we know about Star Wars and the story and kind of flipped it on its head. It can be a bit confusing, but even when you realize what's going on, it makes the story even worse. One thing the entire sequel trilogy suffers from is not having the same director for all three movies. Even though the OT isn't all George, he still was the driving force keeping the train on the rails. Rey and Kylo having this weird romantic connection all done through force bonding is just weird. Rey is an unlikely relative, and the third act is one of the most jumbled together things I've ever seen. I will pay it this compliment. It is visually stunning, with some cool saber battles and action throughout. But this film is culmination of everything that went wrong with the franchise after being purchased by a certain global force. The reason this franchise's film's future is uncertain. Thank God we got Mando Season 3 coming this year. Overall, I will give Rise of Skywalker a 4.5 out of 10. Number 10, Attack of the Clones, 2002, directed by George Lucas. Now, I put this movie here at 10 for a very specific reason, and it has nothing to do with the story. The story itself is one of the most crucial and important to the overall Star Wars story. So many things are happening in this film that all play a critical role into A New Hope, where this all started at. The beginnings of the Civil War as Dooku forms a confederacy, the story of Boba and Jango, Anakin and Padme forming their relationship, Obi-Wan discovering the clone army, and the onset of the Clone Wars, a major threat to the galaxy. The issue with this movie is the pacing. This movie is long and kind of moves like a snail. This also isn't George's best writing. Parts of this movie can be boring and drag on. The third act, though, does pick up, and you get a very controversial lightsaber battle involving your favorite green shorty. With that, this story does set us up for one of the best and most entertaining entries in the franchise that we will discuss later. Overall, I will give Attack of the Clones a 5.2 out of 10. Number 9, The Last Jedi, 2017, directed by Rian Johnson. I do really like Rian Johnson as a director, and I actually don't think this movie overall is that bad, if you aren't a Star Wars fan. I think if this was a standalone movie with a few tweaks to the story and called something else, this would be a decent sci-fi action blockbuster. But it's not. It's a Star Wars movie, and that's where the problem lies. This movie is entertaining and decently paced, and I just can't stand the budding relationship you see coming with Kylo and Rey. And you can start to see the weird direction they are taking with Rey's character, and you know it's not going anywhere good. Luke having a major role in this film was great fan service, and he is the most entertaining part of the movie. I found his arc with Kylo interesting and a decent plot point, while I found his relationship with Rey pointless and a missed opportunity for a more cliche story, but one that would have made more sense and opened up better opportunities for its follow-up. The end of this movie has puzzled some fans, and I still don't know how I personally feel about it. I was very happy to see the late and very great Carrie Fisher in this movie. She died the year before it's released. R.I.P. Overall, I will give The Last Jedi a 5.9 out of 10. Number 8. The Phantom Menace, 1999, directed by George Lucas. Okay, now, I know there's some hardcore prequel fans wondering why this is where it is. First off, this movie on a given day could be number one for me because it was the first Star Wars movie I saw in theaters, and I loved it as a kid. I had a Darth Maul backpack, and I was him for Halloween that year. I've always loved the Sith. Now that I'm older and have watched all these multiple times, I have to put this here. It must be admired for bringing back the franchise with some insane visuals and a big step to the future of blockbusters. George had a vision here and unapologetically ran with it, and I love that. With that said, this movie is not perfect. It suffers from some pacing issues and awkward dialogue. The acting was criticized, which I think in this movie, it actually isn't that bad. But this movie has some awesome stuff too. The pod race scene is super fun and cool, and so over the top you can't look away. You get to see how some of your favorite stuff from the OT came about, and this movie has one of the best lightsaber battles between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Darth Maul. It shows us the conflict and how we got to where this all started in A New Hope. Although it lacks the weight and emotions of the OT, I think The Phantom Menace is a staple in film history and should be admired as such. Overall, I will give The Phantom Menace a 6.5 out of 10. Number 7. The Force Awakens, 2015, directed by J.J. Abrams. As a movie, this movie is entertaining. It's fun. It's got all little blockbustery one-liners, it's visually stunning, and it's packed with action. This is probably the best paced Star Wars movie since Empire Strikes Back, if we're being honest. Yet it still has so many issues. But they are covered up with a lot of other things that on first watch you may not notice. The first thing you would notice is it's basically A New Hope without the slow start to it. Almost the exact same story. Now, I can't get into all those details here, that would need to be its own separate video. I'm not upset they took this direction, and I understand why. It was safe. With Disney's first entry to their newly acquired property, they went full on fan service with tons of references to the OT trilogy. Now, our hero, Rey, although a cool character that I think was well cast, she is totally a mystery here, having seemingly zero connection to this or anything that is going on, but being so well connected at the same time. We all have assumptions about who she may be, and that will be revealed in time, which will likely disappoint the OG fans. All the new characters here are all pretty cool, with Finn, Poe, and BB-8 being the standouts. There is one that just gets under my skin. Kylo Ren. Kylo is brilliantly played by the great Adam Driver, who I think is one of the best actors of his generation, and I hate this character in every single one of the movies. He is horribly written and just makes us really miss seeing the great Lord Vader on screen. As a villain, he isn't to be feared by anyone, not in the movie or the audience. Essentially an angsty teen who is upset with his mommy and daddy. I don't know if this was done on purpose, but for me personally, it just doesn't work. Dude gets beat by a day one Jedi who doesn't even know who she is yet. And let's not talk about some of the other stuff he does in this movie. Haven't talked for too long about this film. It is a decent fun blockbuster that served its purpose of making a safe film that most fans of the series could digest, while new fans would be intrigued. Overall, I will give The Force Awakens a 6.6 out of 10. Guys, if you've made it this far into the video, you might as well go ahead and subscribe and like this video. I really appreciate it. Number 6. Solo, 2018, directed by Ron Howard. First thing I just want to say, Ron Howard is one of the most underrated directors of all time, and I think this movie is so underrated. Was the film necessary to the overall story of Star Wars? No. Was it a fun movie that just added to the flavor of Han, Lando, and Chewie? Yes. This movie is gorgeous and a fun adventure with some familiar faces. We get a great Star Wars story with no lightsaber fights and a bunch of crime and gambling and some heartfelt personal moments between the real humans of the galaxy. Alden Ehrenreich is a great young Han and carries that same charisma and charm that Harrison Ford has. I mean, okay, he's not Harrison Ford, of course, but the kid serves it up in this. The real star, though, is Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. Man, oh man, who could have thought someone would have more charm than Billy D. Williams? Glover gives us a funny, slick, smooth, and surprisingly emotional performance as Calrissian that can't be denied. This movie's main issue is pacing. It can be cut about 20 or 25 minutes, and it would be even better. This is really a pass or fail for most people, but it is the least important to the overall story and was a really fun movie for the deep fans of Star Wars. Overall, I'm going to give Solo a 7.5 out of 10. Number 5, Rogue One, 2016, directed by Gareth Edwards. Rogue One would come right before A New Hope, that start of it all. I think I would have respected Disney a lot more if they kicked off their start to the Star Wars with this movie. They made a wars movie that played like a drama but carried the entertainment of an action movie. This movie was well directed, well acted, and well written and answers the grand old question, why the was there a weakness built in the Death Star? It's a great prequel story to A New Hope, and it essentially leads us right into it. A different type of Star Wars movie. It's more mature, more emotional, and more personal as you connect with these characters you only see one time in movies. I found myself deeply connecting with Jen. I think she was an awesome lead and was everything I wanted Rey to be as a character. The beauty about Rogue One is while being a completely different type of Star Wars movie, it captures the essence of what Star Wars is really built upon better than almost every other movie. Its characters. We connected with all these characters so quickly and learn their personality so fast that it strikes us emotionally as we see what happens to each of them individually. We also get a couple of nice cameos from the great Lord Vader, and the one at the end is worth watching the whole movie alone for. Overall, I will give Rogue One an 8 out of 10. Number 4, Revenge of the Sith, 2005, directed by George Lucas. This movie is a personal favorite of mine for many reasons, mostly because it's the darkest movie of the series and it took major risks in its storytelling. Risks that Lucas had to be sure of and confident in, and I respect that so much. Him taking a dark approach to this movie that is technically meant for kids could have easily went south. I love how this movie lays out everything wrong with all sides of every extreme party in the galaxy. The Jedi and their morals and motives come into question. Anakin questions them, and rightfully so. This leads to one of the best origin stories we've ever seen, the birth of Darth Vader, arguably the best and one of the most popular villains of all time. This film is exciting right from the beginning and never loses steam. The film, I think, is a great prequel that would lead into A New Hope before Rogue One was released. Hayden Christensen gets a very bad rap for this movie. I think he portrayed the anxiety-ridden and paranoid young Jedi very well. Of course, it's easy to say his acting is bad going against some of the other heavyweights in the movie, but this kid was solid and led this amazing movie to the finish line. There are tons of flaws in this movie, and it can be picked apart all day long. But the turn of Anakin to the dark side is one of the best story arcs in all of Star Wars. And this movie is pure fun. Overall, I'm going to give Revenge of the Sith an 8.3 out of 10. Number 3, Return of the Jedi, 1983, directed by Richard Marquand. Well, now we have our first OT movie on the list. First thing I want to say about this movie is that it is better than most people give it credit for. I've heard so many people dog this movie, and I just never understood why. It definitely has its issues, and let's start with those. My first issue is Han Solo. One of the best characters in Star Wars felt so stiff and lacked all the charm he had in the first two films. We all know he didn't want to do it, or he wanted his character to be killed off. But honestly, I prefer him in The Force Awakens to this. Another issue is the Ewoks. Yes, they're cute and cuddly, but I'm sorry, they just feel so kiddish. And although yes, Star Wars is a movie for kids, I just kind of wish they would have went with the Wookiees instead. The pacing is a little slow in the first two acts, but this movie has the best third act in Star Wars, in my opinion, of course. Luke has grown so much. He's strong, confident, and super intelligent. He has really come onto his own as a Jedi. This is the first time we get to see Palpatine in the flesh, and my lord, is he one of the scariest dudes ever. The final fight with Luke and Vader and the conversations they're having is just some of my favorite stuff in Star Wars. You can just feel the weight of what they're saying. You can feel the emotions between Palpatine, Vader, Luke. It's just so great. This movie is truly a story about Luke more than anything, his progression, his redemption, and his future. Overall, I will give Return of the Jedi an 8.7 out of 10. Number 2, A New Hope, 1977, directed by George Lucas. This is where it all started. One of the most influential and groundbreaking films of all time. A New Hope has received praise from almost everyone. Some major cinephiles just credit this film as one of the best ever made, but I highly disagree. I can only imagine seeing this in the theaters back in May of 77. People I've talked to who have seen this at its release have nothing but amazing things to say. How groundbreaking, how they were just stuck in a trance, how they felt like they were in space for 2 hours. We could go on and on about this movie, so I'll try and keep this brief. Although it does start a little bit slow, the world Lucas created in this is breathtaking with some amazing characters, beautiful cinematography, and one of the best compositions of all time by John Williams. This space western is one of the coolest things ever put to screen and one of the most fun adventure movies ever made. The risks that were taken here can only be admired. George Lucas changed film forever with this movie, and for the better. Star Wars A New Hope is one of the best pieces of art to ever be blessed on this earth. Overall, I will give A New Hope a 9.8 out of 10. Well, guys, process of elimination will tell you that number 1, The Empire Strikes Back, 1980, directed by Irvin Kershner. Well, here we are, ladies and gents. Our number 1 pick for the best Star Wars movie ever made. Well, I'm going to be biased here because this is my favorite movie, not just in Star Wars, but of all time. Well, this or maybe Boogie Nights from Paul Thomas Anderson. This is a perfect film. From the opening shot of the icy planet Hoth, we knew we were in for a treat. This movie amps everything up, and I mean everything. The characters are deeper and have motives with higher stakes. This movie takes a much darker tone than the original, and it was the right move. Luke is honing in on becoming a Jedi. Han and Leia are falling in love. The Empire is really taking over, and it blends all these stories together so seamlessly. Luke, Han, Leia, Chewie, R2, and C3 are all at the top of their game while we are introduced to some cool new players. The silky smooth scoundrel and card player, Lando Calrissian, and the green wise Jedi Master Yoda, who is one of the best characters in movie history. The character, though, in this movie is the great Darth Vader. Dressed in all black with a shiny new helmet and a much needed cleanup to the look of his character. And boy, oh boy, is he at the top of his game. He is so lovable, all while being such a disgusting, mean hearted, evil man. Him and Yoda can be quoted all day long from this movie. Darth Vader just epitomized badass in this film, and because of that, he is one of my personal favorite characters of all time. The world that was extended on from the first film in this movie is just mind blowingly gorgeous and unique. Cloud City is a place I would love to live. This movie is one of the best twists in cinema history. I mean, we all know what it is, and the first saber fight with Luke and Vader is timeless. Without this movie, the franchise would not be what it is today. This movie is a perfect example of how to do a sequel. The Empire Strikes Back is one of the most important films in history and is a huge reason that I love movies to this day. So I owe a lot to this film. And with that said, overall, I will give The Empire Strikes Back a perfect 10. Star Wars has had a huge influence on me and a ton of other people. So, with this list, I love Star Wars no matter what movie is your favorite, whether you're a fan of the shows, animated projects, comic books, or the novels. A Star Wars fan is a Star Wars fan, and I hope you enjoyed my list. Make sure you give me your rankings in the comments. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and may the Force be with you.